faceoff. Shoots it deflected right in. Pietrangelo save rebound. Stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Neither does Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie Sparkly. Now that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to episode 92 of Tendy Talk, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network and the BLPA Podcast Networks. I'm your host Joe, better known as Wash Up Goalie on social media. This week I chat with one of my old high school goalie partners, Don Merkle. Don and I saw so many shots during our freshman and sophomore years that I think some people question the truthfulness of our stories from those years. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Don. Well, Don, thanks for joining me. It's good to talk to you again. God, it's got to have been 20 years since we've talked.
Probably since 99.
Yeah. Well, did you play in any of the alumni games like right after graduation?
No, I was often invited, but I wasn't able to work it out with work.
Oh, yeah, because I know I came in, I think one or 2 years. I know freshman year I did because me and Mike Walsh came in because we played at St. Mary's together. And then I think sophomore year I came, and that was probably my last one because it's a bit of a drive from Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So how's life been treating you?
Pretty good. Moved away from the Oak Lawn area. Live out now in northern Illinois, a little town called Chena, Illinois.
Yep, I know the area because of Dad teaching all over the state. I know a lot of those small little towns because of him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes, but one of the first things I like to ask a lot of goalies is how did you even get started in the game of hockey? Because when we were growing up, hockey wasn't huge in Chicago. So what got you interested in it?
I was later. I wasn't one of those folks who started really young. It was probably later grade school, and it was just some neighborhood kids were playing street hockey, but that was before even rollerblades were a big thing. So everyone wore gym shoes. And we just played in the street. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the saying "car, game on, time out." We'd all move. Then probably a couple of years later, a lot of the other kids ended up getting rollerblades. And since I didn't have them, it was the unfair advantage that the guy in gym shoes could always turn a lot quicker than the guy in the rollerblades. So that's when I was told you have to be goalie. And that's kind of how that started.
And you were told you had to be goalie, and you liked it. You weren't going to go back, obviously.
No. I've enjoyed it ever since.
You talk of those neighborhood kids. Some of them wound up being our high school teammates as well.
They did. Yep. Yeah. A couple of them.
Yeah. So that's the fun part of it too. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing of, the neighborhood you grew up in. A lot of those kids wound up playing Oak Lawn House League, and then they wound up at Brother Ice with us. When did you find yourself on the ice?
I probably really didn't start playing on the formalized ice probably until 7th or 8th grade. I mean, there was the Stony Creek pond just down the road, a block or so away from where I grew up. So whenever time that froze, we always played on that. But as far as any type of organizational hockey, it wasn't until 7th or 8th grade that I really started going.
And, it's not like there was formalized goalie coaching for the most part when we were growing up either. Even if you were playing, especially playing house league. I mean, I went to some of the stuff over the summer here and there, but like me, you're pretty much self-taught.
It pretty much is. No, there wasn't much for any goalie camps or something specific like that when we were younger, and you pretty much taught yourself. And luckily, we usually had plenty of opportunities to stop the puck when we played for Rice there for a few years.
Yeah, we did, and we will get there for sure. I had one of those feelings last night in my beer league game. I saw 50 shots, and I was like, Jesus Christ, it brings back memories because, my teammates were the defensemen were looking up ice and just passing the puck right up the middle to,
Yeah.
a guy wearing a different color jersey than us. In fact, I had to tell one of my defensemen at one point what color jerseys we were wearing just so he knew. After the game, I asked him, I was like, are you colorblind by chance? Because you kept giving the puck to them. But yeah, it kind of reminded me of those Brother Rice days. So as you're getting into the game of hockey, what are mom and dad thinking when you're like, what, I want to play this really expensive game and
And the
just for
most
fun,
expensive position.
yeah, I want to play the most expensive position. Because, I mean, your mom and dad were kind of like mine in that, not hockey parents by any means. It was just, we drug them into it.
Yeah, pretty much. My dad didn't get it at first. He was more of a baseball guy when he was growing up, and mom, she was certainly, as always, like mom, supportive of me doing
Mhm.
anything I liked, and as long as it got me out of the house for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, it took probably a couple of years before my dad came and actually saw a game. He traveled a lot for work,
Yep.
and then he got it, and he saw what fun I was having. So everything pretty much kept going from there. I think my first set of pads, they were um, by no means were they your top brand or anything like that. But once they saw how much I liked it, and I finally grew out of those, and it was time for a next one. They kind of let me pick what I wanted.
Yeah. I always remember your mom just kind of being, just this happy go lucky mom at the games, supportive of everybody. Uh,
Yeah,
you know, yeah. So, you know, growing up on the south side, when it comes time to pick high schools, we have a lot of options. Uh, what was it about Brother Rice where you're like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go play hockey there?
that was a tough one. My dad went to Mount Carmel, so a rival of ours.
Yeah.
Um, and I know when I was in eighth grade, I was leaning towards St. Rita, and I know they had me come out to a few of their JV practices when I was in eighth grade because I think they were running out of goalies at that point. I think a bunch were graduating, so
Yeah.
they came, found me. I was able to stand and breathe. They're like, "Well, you'll do."
Yeah.
Uh,
I know they
and
had the Darlis brothers coming in when we were there. One of
yeah,
those was a goalie.
and then really, I think at the end, what pushed it to Brother Ice was friends were going there. The friends that we grew up playing hockey
Yeah.
with, and well, it was closer. So that was
Yeah.
always a problem with St. Rita or Mount Carmel, I guess, how to get there. Whereas Brother Ice, it was a far walk, but it was a walkable high school.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember mom would drop me off at school and I would have my rollerblades and I would rollerblade home as long as there wasn't snow on the ground
Yeah,
because I could get home quicker. When I was looking at schools, Marist was never an option for me. I couldn't do it because my dad was a Brother Rice grad. So I grew up with this mentality that Marist is terrible.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
even though my best friend from grade school went there, so we always picked on each other for that. But I almost went to St. Lawrence. I really thought I was going to go there, and then I did a shadow day at Brother Rice and went to plenty of the skates. I went to every one of those school skates you could go to
Yeah.
growing up because to me it was extra ice time. And I don't know, I just last minute I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go to Brother Rice. I'm glad I did, not just from the hockey aspect, but from the school aspect. Yeah, obviously,
Right.
good school and had fun. I mean, there's still when I'm back in town, I'll go and say hi to Brother Hayes and some of the other teachers that are still hanging around. And I think what's cool is we can go back 20 years later, and those teachers still remember us. You don't have to jog their memory; they see our faces and they remember who we are.
Huh. I actually haven't. I mean, I've been back to the school like when my brother went there, um, but I probably haven't been back. Oh, I bet you it's a good 17 years or so.
Yeah. I want to say it's been well, Gus is 14. It's probably been 8 or 9 years. Mr. Antos was still the principal, and my dad and I, we stopped by. It was after school, and Mr. Antos was still hanging around. So we sat around and talked a little bit. And then he looks at me and he goes, "Is it okay if I give him candy?" I was like, "Well, yeah, okay." So he's like, come back here with me. Like, just has this giant jar of candy, giving it to my kid. It was just kind of funny. Um,
Mr.
yeah,
Antos is always one of my favorites.
yeah, he was great. Of course, Coach Merkle was everybody's favorite for different reasons because he was just a goofball. The brother Hayes, I just liked him because he was a pretty darn good teacher. I learned a lot
Yeah.
of physics that when I was stupid enough in college. If you weren't a science major, you still had to take a science class. And I was like, well, they have physics. I really loved physics. I'll take that. Even though they literally had a class that was called Science for Non-Science Majors, meaning easy A. I was like, no, let me take physics. It didn't go too well, and I wound up retaking Science for Non-Science Majors. I was like,
You can't thank Brother Hayes for that one.
No, I was like, this is not the same physics class I was used to, because the professor was actually a Christian brother, but he didn't incorporate the real world examples the way Brother Hayes did. But God, I remember going into freshman year, we were all doing that thunder hockey, which is like all of the Catholic League was just doing thunder hockey. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing the individual skill we had. I'm like, this is going to be a good team. And then we got out on the ice of just our team, and we're like, we have a lot of good individuals, but we don't have a team.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean with that.
Yeah, that was one of those, like, holy cow, And it's funny when I talk to people now, I was like, yeah, freshman, sophomore year combined in league play, we went 138-1. And they're like,
I
oh,
don't
no,
know. I don't remember. I don't remember it being that bad. Who got
yeah,
that one win? You?
you did. We were playing
I did.
Lyons Township.
Oh no.
Yeah, because freshman year we didn't win a Catholic League game, and then sophomore year somehow Lyons Township got into the Catholic League JV league, and we beat them and we tied them. And I don't.
I don't remember winning many. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I still remember that one because Paul Hamilton had gone back to Wisconsin to be with his mom as she wasn't doing well, and so Mike Fielding coached us that game. So he got the one league win in Paul's 2 years of coaching. And Paul even said, it didn't take much to coach that team to a victory that day. We were ready for it. But yeah, I remember that. But when we look at our freshman and sophomore year, we didn't win much. We did okay when we were playing the public schools,
Yeah.
but we had some tough going there. I know I saw a lot of hockey pucks in those 2 years.
Yes, we did.
What were you thinking in those games? Because I know it would have been very easy for a lot of goalies just to kind of get down and give up. But you and we were a little different. We didn't see it that way.
No, I found it fun. One of my favorite teams to always play against was Fenwick.
Mm-hmm.
They always just hit the net hard, and you knew you were going to see, heck, it felt like 20, 30 shots a period on you. So I just liked the action. The score at first, you had to come over that displeasure, that guilt, that little guy in the back of your head saying, wow, I suck, when you let in a 7 or 8 goal game. Once you got over that, though, it was just fun. I just kept coming back for the fun. I wanted to play against the teams that, frankly, we're just going to kick our ass because it meant a good, fun, busy night for me.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember my first college game. Not only did we go from 17-minute periods to 20-minute periods, but I had a defense in front of me. I saw 20 shots in the entire game. And after the game, one of my teammates is like, "Well, what did you think?" And I was like, "I was really bored back there.
Yeah,
Like, it was almost harder for me to play in that game than it was my high school games because it was like I go 4 or 5 minutes without a shot, and I just kind of got into that routine where I was just every time, every 20, 30 seconds, I was ready for a shot normally. But yeah, that first college game was took an adjustment for me.
and I gotta say, there's a lot for goalies who are able to do that. If I was left to my own thoughts for a few minutes, I'd probably start daydreaming and wandering and not be really thinking about the game or overthinking. Like, all right,
Yeah,
I've been standing here for the last 5 minutes. What am I going to do when they actually do come? Am I going to react right, or what's going to happen? So when it was just nonstop, up, down, you didn't have a chance to think.
yeah. It's funny you say that because now that I'm playing beer league hockey, you know, some games it can be that way where it's a couple minutes, and so I've had to kind of think my way through. How do I handle that? And I've just kind of gotten to the point where I just start counting my shots. I'm always trying to remember what one I'm on. My mind doesn't wander; it just stays focused on that, and it's like, okay, that's worked for me. But then games like last night where they just keep coming at me, I'm like, all right, this is good. Try. It was almost more work to figure out, was that shot number 25 or was that shot number 26? But at the end of the day, it didn't matter. But yeah, that is one of those things where if the puck plays in your zone, you're not thinking, you're just reacting, and
No,
that's so much more fun.
I don't think
Um,
we're meant to think when we're in goal.
no, no. What was it? Yogi Berra said the just playing sports in general. It's like 90% of it is reaction. The other half is mental.
Yeah.
It's something like that. One of the things I remember about you from our days at Brother Rice was you were a quiet fellow for the most part. Uh, you were quiet, but I think it was freshman or sophomore year. Locker boxing was a big thing, and
Yes, it
and
was.
I held my own, and you weren't doing much. And then all of a sudden, you're after a practice, you're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go." And I forget who you went up against, but you just clobbered them, and like everybody in the locker room just kind of went quiet and looked around, like, "Let's not mess with Donnie." Donnie's
I
Donnie's
do
different.
remember that. I do remember that. I can't remember who it was that I ended up boxing.
Yeah. All
Now,
I
of course,
know is
they'd
it
say
was
it's an
locker
unfair
room one.
advantage. Yeah, and all they say is an unfair advantage because we got the big old blocker on. But
No, but I remember we would wear player gloves when we
did
locker
we?
box.
I
Yeah, it
remember
was.
locker.
Um, but I remember that, and we're all like, "Ooh, I was it Brad Augustinius maybe that you beat that day. It may have
Hmm.
been him. He was the one we all like to pick on."
There were always a few who seemed to get the brunt of it all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to Brad's credit, like he played into it. He had fun with it too. So it wasn't like we were ganging up on Brad. We still hung out with him and we were nice to him. It was just little things
Yeah.
like that. It was like, yeah, we're gonna pick on you. You're asking for it. Um, God, I remember that. One of the other things I remember is it had to have been sophomore or junior year. You had your license because you were one of the first ones with the license. I remember you had that great big, what was an Oldsmobile thing, was a boat.
I
Um,
I know this story already. It was
yeah,
sophomore
and
year.
we're going to a game. Sophomore year, we're going to a game. We're over by the bowling alley, and you're barely
Mhm.
paying attention to the car in front of you. And we're coming to a stoplight, and you hit the car in front of us.
Yep, yep. I remember that.
Yeah, no damage. I mean, to that, but you know, that was one of the memorable parts of that going to that game. But the other part is, I remember everybody talking about, oh, what do you want to do when you know, when you grow up, if this hockey thing doesn't work out. And you just straight face went, I want to rule the world. Very pinky in the brain. I want to rule the world.
I
Like
still
you
do,
were,
but I haven't gotten there yet.
yeah, yeah. But what scares me about that is, don't you work at a nuclear power plant?
I do. I do. I work at a power plant here in
Yeah,
northern Illinois.
and you want to rule the world, and you work at a nuclear power plant. And I'm going, okay, Donnie is following that progression he said he was going to do.
I remember that drive too. That was the Yeah, I was a sophomore. That was shortly after I got my license too. It didn't take
Yeah,
long for me to have a little bit of a fender bender.
yeah. Luckily, no damage to either car,
No,
but that's
no, we
better.
both got out.
Both cars better. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, to call it a fender bender, it would be like, you know, tapping a car in the parking lot. It's not like we were going more than 2 miles an hour tops when the other car stopped us from going any further.
It certainly felt like it. My heart was racing a lot faster than 2 miles an hour.
And I just remember as soon as you got back in the car and you're like, that all good, and drove away, and we all just started laughing.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
my old 1980 Buick LeSabre. That thing was a beast.
yeah. I remember Anarino was in the car. Uh,
Probably Jeremy.
yeah, Sikorsky and Capron. I think it was the five of us.
That
Um,
that that car could easily fit. Well, hell, there was the five of us, so that was three skaters and two goalies, and it easily fit all that equipment in that big old trunk.
oh yeah, easily. Although that we were going to a varsity game, we weren't playing that night. But yes, that thing could have carried everything. Yeah. Well, I met my grandpa. He was a Finnish carpenter for many years, and he always drove around the big old Cadillacs that looked like your car. And his thought process was, I can put all my tools in my car. Nobody's going to know they're there. But if I have a pickup, they're just out in the open,
Right, right.
you know. But, you were talking about gear earlier. And, you had mentioned at one point, you grew out your stuff and your mom and dad let you get, pick out what you wanted. And you got a set of gear that I was always looking at when I went to Hockey Unlimited, but it's kind of on some of the goalie boards and social media uh, come up, and people are like, "What is this stuff? We want to learn more about." Nobody has information on it. You had the ice gear equipment.
Still
Um,
got it. Still got it
you
too.
do.
Yeah.
First question is, what was it about that stuff that that was what you wanted? If you were able to pick out what you wanted, you were like, I want the ice gear.
Um, it was really just fit. I wish there was a better reason than that, but it fit me better. I was a pretty tall, skinny guy in high school. I since put on quite a bit of weight.
Still
But
tall though.
still tall, still tall. Um, so it just really fit me better.
Yeah.
Wasn't and the colors were, it was just black and white,
Yep.
just a plain Jane color. That way it fit no matter where I went or who I played for. Um, and then I liked it because, Hockey Unlimited spun it as their equipment.
Yeah. It was
Um,
white
so,
labeled as theirs.
so it was um, nice to have something that a lot of people didn't. And I know some people would look at it and ice scare, what's that? Thinking like it's some, Kmart special or something. But I tell you, it's good equipment. It's served me right.
Yeah. Well, and I remember the blocker. I mean, that was the day of the heat and wave where, guys were trying to get as big of a curve on their blocker. But I remember you had that straight blocker with that ice gear stuff,
Yeah, there
which
was a
was,
little bit. There was a little bit of it, but there wasn't much. It wasn't that big wave you're talking about. It just a slight little bevel up.
yep. And I remember seeing the stuff in the locker room, and, you let me kind of inspect a little bit. I mean, construction feel wise was just like the other stuff. I would have at the time probably put it up against Vaughn or Coho or some of those others. I mean, I would say when we were playing, Brian's was the creme de la creme of the
Yeah.
equipment, and the Cooper Reactor 5s were kind of the big one too at that point in time. I remember Sergio had those, and uh, I always had my eye on them because that's what Belfour wore. But I bought most of my equipment from shoveling snow in the winter, so I wasn't going to be getting those at any point in time.
No, they would have been nice, but it was a hard way to justify some of that stuff.
It was. Well, and it's funny because I look at the prices then and it's like, oh God, that's so much. But then I look at it now. I mean, I finally bought new equipment last year. Had the same stuff I did since my freshman year of college, and it was like, holy cow, this stuff's expensive. Even buying a goalie stick now, you can find a goalie stick for under $100 is not easy.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much stuff has gone up in price. But you said you still have that set of equipment. Are you still skating from time to time, or you just can't get rid of it?
I want to say both. I can't get rid of it. I probably haven't really played in about 10 years now. Before that, it was similar to you, bear league, rat hockey, just pickup games and fun, or going out and skating with younger cousins or something. But yeah, it's tough to commit to it. I got a guy at work now. He keeps trying to get me to join his league, and I'd really like to, but I think it's even tougher when you're a goalie because you want to be the guy who gets to play all the time.
Yeah.
And if you can't commit to be there every night because of work or something at work could happen, and suddenly you're like you're the flaky guy who never knows when's going to show up. They're going to go out and get another goalie.
Yeah. I mean that's if I
we can be selfish. Yeah, we can be selfish. We want to play.
If I can't I'm the only goalie on the team, which is typically the case in beer league. They only carry one because that would be kind of crappy to be a beer league goalie and be number 2 on the depth chart. But if I can't make a game, it's pretty much up to me to find my sub for the game. And it's a little easier here in Minnesota to find subs. We have an entire Facebook group of goalies in the Twin Cities. Like, hey, I can't make my game. Who can help me out? And we all kind of help each other out. But you don't want to overcommit.
So it's just been tough. So no, I really haven't played, like I said, in about 10 years. I miss it. I'd like to get back out there again. And I was really tempted when Chris at work kept asking, but just wasn't able to follow through with it.
Well, my recommendation then is just find some rat hockey and just do it. Get back out there, have the fun, because once you're in that crease, it feels good again. I mean, the body is a lot sore the next morning. It's usually not the next morning. It's 2 mornings after is when it's the worst. That's what I know, especially after, like the summer break for me. I still try and skate a little bit over the summer, but it's not every week like it is now. And yeah, those legs, those grinds, they hurt an awful lot that second morning. I'm like, oh.
Not quite as flexible as we once were, or able to bounce back from it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can still do the splits, but I don't bounce back as quick.
The splits finally ended for me. That was a couple of years ago. That finally ended. Just wasn't able to do it anymore. Didn't keep up with the stretching at all.
We were probably the only tandem in the league at the time where both of us could do that. When we think about it, because I think of the other goalies, around the league, you had Raul at Lawrence, you had John Ryan at Marist. I'm trying to think of the Carmel goalie. I can picture him, but I don't recall any of them really doing. John Ryan a little bit. But I don't really recall any of the other goalies being that flexible and relying on it as much as we did.
Desperate times.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we were getting peppered. We had to just throw, we had to be Marc-Andre Fleury and throw the kitchen sink at him and try and stop pucks. Because even if we made a good save that wound up with a rebound, odds are our defense wasn't going to clear it. So we had to do something to get over there.
Hopefully not too many of them watching this, Joe. Otherwise, you might get a few phone calls.
You know what, though? If they are, they all – the beauty of time is we could all objectively look back and go, you know what? Yeah, we sucked.
Yeah.
I've tried convincing a lot of the guys to kind of get the band back together for a weekend beer league tournament, and they all like the idea till it's time to commit and pay $60, and it's like, do I want to do that? In fact, there was a tournament in Madison last summer where it's like, come on, guys, this would be fun. It would be an away tournament for all of us. Hotels across the street from the rink, so we can have a good time. And everybody liked the idea until it was time to.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I had a Facebook group chat going, and out of nowhere, Matt Burbakowskis, of all people, jumps in and he goes, "I will only do it if some poor Swedish kid can get his ass beat by Jeremy Sikorsky again." It was like, all right, there we go. It was like, all right, who's going to find the poor Swedish kid in the Wisconsin Dells?
That was a fun game when those Swedes came over here and decided to play us. Why they chose us or how we got that, I have no idea.
I don't know. I remember there was one game. It was our senior year, and I didn't dress that game because the team that came over was a little bit younger, and I was, I think, 18 already. So it was an under 18 team. So they're like, well, we're not going to dress you. And they brought Dan O'Donnell up to back up. And that was the game that in the handshake line, somebody from Sweden went after Andy Nicky, just cold clocked him. And Jay Nicky was on the bench grabbing six, just comes out and tackles the kid. The brawl ensues. I was the only Brother Rice player that wound up in the ER that night because I had an eardrum rupture. Like, me and my dad were sitting in the ER just laughing, like, all this craziness that happened tonight, and you're the only one in the ER. Now, granted, it had nothing to do with the fight. And what was even crazier is, like, 3 or 4 of those kids were staying with Brother Rice families. So it's like,
I know a lot of them we hosted.
Yeah, I mean, they beat the snot out of us on the ice, but we won the fight fair and square, to the point where, like, a couple of them had to get stitches in the locker room, and then they got to go home with the kids that just kicked the crap out. I was like, what is going on here? I think that was the last time we played a team from Sweden, by the way.
Probably the last time I know being involved with one.
Yeah, but those were some interesting times. Now, we had a rough freshman and sophomore season, but junior season was like a turning point for us on the JV level. We had Coach Pembroke come in. You and I were juniors playing on the JV team, and then we had this weird random kid that now lives in California. Danny O'Donnell is our third goalie. And I laugh because I've had Dan on the podcast too. But for whatever reason, we didn't have as much talent as those first 2 years, but we had a better team. And that, I think, was the big difference. But that was an interesting team. What did you think of it?
It was definitely an interesting team. And I don't know, there was times maybe felt a little out of place since we were we were probably only there were only a few of us who were juniors still on JV.
Yep.
But Sergil was just a year ahead of us, so we weren't going to get him out of his spot while he was still around.
Well, junior year,
I thought it was still Sergil.
Sergil had graduated.
Did he? I thought he was just a year ahead.
Ed Richards was the goalie, the varsity starting goalie, and Joe Dovolina came in as a freshman. And that was a tough season for me to start the season because I was convinced I would be the number 2 on varsity. I busted my tail all summer, and then Dovolina came in and they took him over me. And I remember the phone call with Terry Labella, and we talked about it, and looking back, having the 20 years between then and now to think about it and having coached, I think it was the right decision because instead of he knew he was going to ride Ed, 90% of the games, where if you put me on JV, then I could play more.
Right.
So it was like, but it wasn't presented to me that way. In hindsight, that's what it was, but it wasn't presented to me that way. So I think that's where I had hurt feelings. But remember that first JV practice, Coach Pembroke really set the tone for me. He's like, I know you're upset. He goes, but prove them wrong. Have a season. Go out there, play hard, and prove them wrong. And I like to think I did that. But then, Terry left the program that summer, and
Yeah.
so any promises that were made didn't matter at that point. But I think you and I had a really unique opportunity that year to really be team leaders, and I think we did a good job with that team because they wound up winning a Kennedy Cup after we graduated.
That's what I've heard. That's what I heard. So we
Yeah,
had a bunch of good. We certainly had a good players and teams then.
yeah. Is I say, and Dan O'Donnell even commented when I talked to him, is we helped lay the groundwork for that to happen. We may not have been on that team, but we contributed to it. So as long as somebody on that team is saying it, I'm gonna run with it and say, okay, all right, yeah.
Worked
Whether
for
it
me.
was threatening kids with the paddle or I still remember. I remember when they confiscated our paddles, and then somehow at the next practice, one of our goalie sticks broke, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we had a new one.
We had a new paddle.
I remember my stick somehow broke, and I had an envelope in my hockey bag of a collection from the teammates to buy me a new stick. It was like, yeah, we need a new one. We're going to be a little smarter about it this time. And looking back, probably not the best thing to have a paddle, but I think we were good about it.
It was all fun.
There were two individuals, three, I would say, that kind of got a little out of hand with it, and we just kept it away from them after that. uh, that was the fun thing. That was the initiation. It was, you get your one SWAT, and that's that. And it was usually the seniors who were judicious about it. And if you fought it, you got it a little bit harder, but that was that. Yeah. So senior year, that was another interesting year, because you didn't come out to play.
No.
I think I know why, but why don't you tell me why you chose not to come out your senior year?
It was two reasons. One was I knew I was probably going to be on JV yet again.
Yeah.
And then the other one was at that point I was probably really focusing more on college, to be honest. I kind of already knew when I was probably a freshman what I wanted to go on to study. So the senior year became a lot of those college credit classes. So I spent a lot of time with that and just having fun. But yeah, the thought of being a senior again on JV, that didn't sit as well as I wanted. I've later regretted it. I even did later that season, but at the time, I think the pride just got to me too much, and I said I'm not going to bother with it.
Yeah. Well, and looking back, I mean, it was probably the best thing for Danny O'Donnell to have to play every game. But I think he would have appreciated not having to, and because he had really never played organized hockey until he got to Brother Rice.
Yeah.
So he probably could have benefited from a night off, And I know that senior year, I was expecting to, again, because of promises that were made, to be that number one go-to guy. And then we got the new coach who many of the teammates effectively referred to as the pencil head, the Canadian. he saw things differently, and it was a pretty close to a platoon, kind of in every other game. But I felt at the time that there were games I should have had that I didn't get, and I look back at it, and you know, I think if I were put in that situation as a coach who wasn't a goalie, I probably would have gone with Dovalina too, because technically he looked better. But
Yeah.
he was a really good practice goalie. Who did? I mean, he played well in games. I'll give him that, but he didn't have the fight that you or I had. And when you get into some of the playoff games, I think you need the fight over the technical side of things. But you know, we we went as far as we were going to go, regardless of who was in net. So I can't
Yeah,
complain too
right.
much. And I got to keep playing after college. If anything, that was one of the things that motivated me when I walked on at St. Mary's. It was like, I want to prove some of these people wrong. And I was fortunate. I got to play another 2 seasons with Mike Walsh, so that was fun. Um, but it was funny because when I got to St. Mary's, Walsh had that knee replacement, or not knee replacement, but he blown his knee out and had surgery, and so he lost all of his speed. And then with that monotone voice and everything, everybody called him Grandpa. And we sat by each other in the locker room, and it was like, let me tell you a story about Grandpa, guys. He used to be fast, and they're like, no, he didn't. It's like, oh yeah, he used to be a fast guy until he had the surgery. I'm like, no, no. And we were playing Shattuck St. Mary's, and he gets a breakaway and scores. He comes back to the bench, and the coach is like, how did you, of all people, get a breakaway? I don't know. Everybody was back checking so hard. I think they just skated right past me because he had that just dry sense of humor. Um, yeah, he was fun to keep skating with. Um, so switching gears, Jimmy Saviano was in town 4 or 5 years ago, and I went out to grab a bite to eat with him, and he told me something about you. Is it true
Great.
that you married Vince Lombardi's granddaughter?
She claims the granddaughter. That's a heck of a stretch there. That family claims to be relations to Vince Lombardi. Yes,
Okay, so you married a
I say I want to
potential
see the family tree, but they haven't shown that to me.
Lombardi descendant, but she's from like the Jersey area, though, right?
Yep, Ramsey, New Jersey.
And that's where Vince was from too. So it's
That's
it's
what they
it's
tell me.
plausible that things check out. So when she brings you home and the family finds out you're a Bears fan, how did that go
That was fine because they're Giants fan, Giants and Jets. That's because the Giant Stadium, it's right there, and
Yeah.
it's actually in Jersey. It's not in New York, so
Yep.
uh, they're Giants fans, so they had no problem there. I don't know if they liked it that I didn't believe the relation to Lombardi, and I still don't to this day until I see proof. But that's what they tell me.
Now, did they like you a little more when they found out that a classmate of yours was guarding Eli Manning for all of those years? And
That actually they did. I remember, telling them when we watched a couple games together that Dave Deal was Brother Rice alumni.
yeah, yeah, it was hard not to see him in the hallways. Him and Joe Carroll, they were just those monsters walking through that towered above everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but as I've told people, Dave was always the nicest kid. If he saw that freshman getting picked on, he'd try and do something to get in the way.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's a testament to his mom and dad too.
Right.
And I say that because I mean they were walking those halls every day too. So if they didn't see him doing something, they'd probably they'd probably have one of the brothers do something about it.
Yeah.
Um, as I think of that, did I ever tell you the story of Brother Haas? Because he was the religion teacher who was, if you didn't have your top button, he'd give you detention. If you were
Yeah.
missing that little collar button, he'd give you detention. Well, it was, our junior year, my mom and dad were in England visiting family. And so I would drive to my aunt and uncle's house every day, who lived a block from the school. I would park in their driveway and walk to school. The trade-off was I had to sit down and talk to them every day after school, and because they were, probably in their 70s at the time, it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I'm sitting there the one day, and both of their boys went to Brother Rice. One of them graduated with my dad. The other one's a little bit older, who, ironically enough, that Brother Rice grad went to St. Mary's just like I did, and then wound up living about 10 minutes from me up here in Minnesota. I was like, crazy the paths we take. But so I'm sitting there talking to my aunt. She goes, "Do you have a brother Haas?" I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Let me tell you some stories about him." I was like, "Oh, interesting." Well, when he was a kid, he was friends with my Uncle Johnny. And the one story that got me, well, my aunt and uncle had a doorbell that you could program songs into. So Brother Haas programmed Inagata Devita into their doorbell. And my uncle hated him for that because he didn't know how to program it himself. But my aunt said she's walking home the one day, and this person jumps out of the tree and just screams at her and just scares the bejesus out of her. It was Brother Haas. Well, the next day I'm walking into school, and I intentionally don't have my tie up. I have the button undone, and he calls me over, pulling out his detention pad. I go, "Brother Haas, I was talking to somebody yesterday who knows you." He goes, "Oh, yeah?" And he's starting to write things down. I go, "They told me some stories." And he just, "Yeah? What stories?" And I just start talking. And he goes, "Who do you know?" And after that, I had no problems with him when he found out who my aunt was. And he's like, "Yep, do as you want." I'm
Good.
not going to. But it was just funny. Who do you know? So we've been talking a while, and it's been fun. I think we could probably keep on going. But I end every episode asking a list of 10 questions. They're the same 10 questions I've asked every single guest, from Eddie Belfour to Kelly Rudy, all the way down to, recent Brother Rice grad Ed. I'm going to butcher his last name, but I had one of the Brother Rice goalies on last year. So the first one, I know there's some in my mind that stick out to me since we've had some of the same coaches. What's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days?
Craziest coaching moment. Ooh, that's a tough one. Not too many are crazy coming to mind. I don't remember the coaches being that crazy.
I would say for me it would be freshman year state playoffs when Paul Hamilton got kicked out of the game and broke his clipboard over Anarino's head.
I don't remember that.
What I remember of it is the refs weren't that great that night, and he was arguing a call, and he drops an F-bomb, and the ref kicks him out of the game. So he turns and throws his clipboard while we're playing at the Spectrum. It ricochets off of one of those metal girders that were behind the bench and hits Anarino on the head and breaks over his head. Well, that wasn't the end of it, because they had those stairs up to nowhere. So Paul's pouting, stomping up the stairs, and you just hear the echo, thump, 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 and then he just sits down like this to watch the rest of the game. And then I remember after the game in the locker room, those tiny, narrow locker rooms that just smell horrible. But I remember him going, "Now, if your mom and dad ask what I was saying to the ref, I was asking them what were they thinking with the call. Now, whatever else they think they may have heard, that is not it." Now, TJ and I got invited to Paul's wedding, and it was in La Crosse, Wisconsin, right across the river from where I was going to school. And I stayed at school over the summers to work hockey camp, so it wasn't a big deal for me to go. But TJ came up, and we're at the reception, and rather than the clink of the glasses, you had to come up and offer a bit of advice. for them to get, kiss each other. So we waited a little while, and then finally we get up and we're walking up there. And the best part is, I don't know if you remember, but quite a few of Paul and Wendy's friends would come down every so often. They would come to our games. And we start walking up, and Paul's looking at us just like with this death stare, shaking his head no. And Wendy's already laughing. And he doesn't see that we're carrying something with us. And we brought him a new whiteboard, a clipboard. And we presented it to him, and then we turned to Wendy and said, now, whenever Paul is angry and may have this in his hand, we recommend you leave the room. Well, all of his friends knew what was going on, and he's just like, you assholes. But then it was a couple of years ago, Paul was in town with his family, and I was working over by the Mall of America at the time, and they were going to dinner there. And so I met up with them, and he's now a psychologist and everything else. And I think of him as the stepdad from the movie The Santa Claus, like, all right, let's have a feelings inventory. And so he's telling these stories about me, like when he started me the day after Eddie Balfour was traded, and he had to pull me after the first period because I had let 6 in already, and this and that. And I said, did your dad ever tell you when you got kicked out of a hockey game? And they're like, no. And he's like, don't you dare. Don't you dare. And Wendy just looks at him and she goes, fair is fair, Paul. And so I start telling this story, and the boys are just howling. They're like, Dad, didn't you, stop and think about your feelings and how your feelings were projecting on other people? It was like all the things he pulls on them. I was like, yep, they needed to hear this one. So the next question is, what is your favorite all-time goalie mask?
I mean, I want to say it's Balfour's. David just grew up watching them.
Yep.
So it's definitely the Eagles.
Yeah, it's mine too. And if I had to pick one of his, I would probably go with the original, just because it was the original. But that one he had later on that Todd Miska painted, where had the eagle and the feathers and everything, that was pretty sweet too.
Yeah.
The only one I never really liked is when it had those weird out of place talons on the chin. It was like the talons just didn't feel like they fit.
I know what you mean.
If they wouldn't have put those on there, I think it would have looked better. So what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
If I have to say, I liked Old Oak Lawn. I don't know, something about it. I just liked that rink. It was always a little cooler than the rest.
Yeah.
The boards always made, whether it was being hit by a puck or a player, the boards, they just bounced every which way. They made a sound. I mean, they're probably because they're about to fall over, but
Yeah. I got my first shot out there.
Did you?
Yeah, and I loved the locker rooms because they were just the pool locker rooms. So it reminded me of the movie The Mighty Ducks, and one of the rinks are in, where it's just like this wide open deal where it's just like they weren't hockey locker rooms by any means. It was like, yep,
No.
that's where you go. It was a unique rink, and all of the rinks on the south side had their own unique smells. Where if I closed my eyes, I could smell that old
Yeah.
Oak Lawn. It was. I remember Homewood Flossmoor kind of had a burnt caramel corn taste smell to it. Oak Lawn was kind of like that hockey locker room, but with the pool chemicals mixed in.
Yeah, no, it definitely always. But you like that smell, even to this day. When as soon as I walk into any rink, that
Yeah.
just the smell of the ice, it gives
Oh yeah.
like butterflies in the stomach.
Yeah, nothing better than walking into a rink early in the morning. You still have that haze over the ice, and never fails. If I'm not feeling good and I head to that rink, it always clears up the sinuses. At least
I
while I'm
haven't
there.
tried that.
Once I leave, yeah, it's just you go in, you get that deep breath of the cool air, and it always works for me. So this is one I like to ask people: what's your favorite goalie stick that you ever used?
Goalie stick.
I remember you used to use those Heaton Brodeurs a lot.
I had those. I had some Christensen. I had a Shorewood. It might have. I think it was a. If I had to go back, it was probably a Shorewood. It was black and red, and it was a heavier stick.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of forced me to keep it on the ice to try to close up that 5-hole a little bit more. So I think I'd have to pick that one.
I still like the heavier sticks for that reason. That's why I haven't gone composite. 'Cause it's like they're too light. How do I know if I have my stick on the ice?
Yeah.
Although this year I've been playing with the shorter paddle, and that's been an interesting transition for me. Because I've been reading that it's shorter paddle better for when you're down the butterfly and everything else. So I'm like, I grew up where we just got as big and heavy as a stick as we could find.
Yeah,
That was
exactly.
that. So what's your favorite youth hockey memory? And I would say that goes through high school.
I'd say that game where I don't know, I'll call it we opened up for the Chicago Wolves. We got
Oh
to
yeah,
play
yeah.
at Rosemont. Um, you and I split that game,
Yep.
which rightfully so. It was a good time. And I don't know, it was just the feeling of playing in a rink that size, a professional rink, and
Yeah.
then stick around later and watching the Wolves play on the same ice.
I remember they gave us the referee's locker room, and there were like 6 chairs in that room, and then like 2 couches. And I remember nobody wanted to sit by Chris Walsh because he hadn't washed his jerseys all season, and his home
Yeah.
white jersey was yellow. And we're like, no, you have this entire corner in this tiny room, and we all were like, I don't know how we got our own equipment on because there just wasn't enough room. But what I remember most about that game is how hot it was just sitting on the bench because of those lights.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just like, oh. Yeah, my daughter, she's a huge Reba McEntire fan, and she finally got to see Reba in concert, and they went and saw her at the Rosemont Horizon. So they were going in for it. I was like, hey, kid, while you're there, just know I played hockey there. And she's like, you've played hockey everywhere, Dad. Of course you did. I was like, yeah, but I usually don't play in big buildings like that. But yeah, she thought it was pretty cool. So what's the best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, directed at you, not directed at you?
Oh, uh, I can't say I got too many. I mean, there's a whole bunch that are coming to mind, but there's none that I've ever been involved with. I mean, um, we certainly never got there that I can recall too much in high school.
Well, we had some guys that would say stuff in the locker room, but half the time I didn't listen to those three, so it was kind of in one ear out the other.
Yeah.
There's one I remember you. I even remember it was at Orland Park or ice rink, but it's not very PC, so I won't share it now. But there was one, and it wasn't so much a chirp as it was a comment after the game where like, "Oh my God, Donnie, did you just say that?"
I don't remember this one.
Yeah. After I hit end on the record, I'll have to mention that one to you because it was just so like delivered just right with the dry humor, but like in a non-abusive way. But yeah. So since you played some beer league, well, and I knew you in high school too. What's the worst post-game beer you've had?
Me, I don't know. I mean, they're all pretty shitty to me. I'm a Bush Light guy. I'm a Bush Light guy. Anything other than Bush Light, and it's pretty crap. I know a lot of people try to bring in some craft beers and stuff like that. You can just go ahead and dump that in the shower. Um,
I'm amused at the guy who likes the Bush Light is the one saying, I don't know, everything else is pretty crappy. It's like,
right, right here. Been drinking them
yeah,
while we're doing this.
yeah, no, What I will say is like those domestic light beers right after a game, I think are just perfect. I'll drink the craft beers in the parking lot, but right after a game in the locker room, those beers are good because they're closer to water than the other ones. There's
Yeah.
not too much to them, and so they're crisp, they're refreshing. And Bush Light will be the big one in the locker room this time of year because they get the orange cans up here for hunting season. And for
Yeah.
some reason, my teammates love the orange cans. um, so when you taped your stick, did you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
Trying to think. I was toe to heel. I found it
Why?
easier to get around it.
Okay. Because we're of the era where we went around the heel, and I always went heel to toe because I found it easier to start there. Only because if I screwed up, I didn't have as much tape to take off. So it was pure laziness as to why I go heel to toe. Um, what was your favorite number to wear and why?
Number one, I chose that. Probably because you took 30 for Belfour. So I was kind of stuck with that. And I was just like, well, that's still a pretty unique number, and the goalie needs to have a unique number.
Well, I was 30 in youth hockey, and then when I got to Brother Rice, 30 wasn't an option, but 35 was because Sergio had 35. And so when they ordered jerseys, that's what they had. So I went with 35 through college or through high school because when I got to college, 35 was taken by a senior. So then I got 39. But yeah, I was like, what kind of team is this if they don't have 30? Come on.
Exactly.
But I kind of liked 35. It fit my personality at the time. Um, but yeah, one's a goalie number you don't see many kids wearing now, and I don't know why.
I
But
don't either. I liked it.
yeah. Well, and the story behind why pro goalies used to wear one is back in the days of traveling by train, your sleeping berth got assigned by what number you were, and the number one sleeping berth was the biggest one. So they always wanted the goalies to have the best night's sleep. So they gave them number one.
I didn't
Um,
know that.
and that's why a lot of, the old time greats had single digit numbers too, so that they got a bigger berth. Uh, so yeah, that was one of those weird random factoids that I know. My wife says I'm a lot like Cliff Clavin. I know a lot of useless knowledge, but she also wants me on her team when we're playing Trivial Pursuit because of
There you go.
it. So the last question: what advice do you have for young goalies?
It's really just have fun. Like we talked about earlier when we were playing for Rice, and we would see just nonstop barrage. Don't let the score get in your head.
No.
Just have fun, enjoy it. It's the best practice you're going to have is a game where you're getting shots, and especially if you're still trying to win and come from behind. It not just teaches you to be better, but it makes you a stronger mental person. That you're
Well,
able to stay in there and keep going, even though you've let in. I'd have to say you and I probably had decent save percentages. Our goals against though is probably you need an extra pad of paper to write those down. But it just taught you to stick in there, stick with the game, don't give up.
because of when we played, I mean, computers were around, but like stats were kept, they were printed each week and put in the, glass case at Southwest Ice Arena. I remember, I don't know if it was freshman or sophomore year. I remember looking towards the end of the season at the goalie stats, and you and I were in the top 5 for save percentage, but we're also at the bottom of the league for goals against.
I can believe that for sure.
I would be willing to get find those numbers. One of us probably finished the year with the best save percentage and the worst goals against. And it's not supposed to be that way, but as you say that, it reminded me of two stories. One, I was listening to goalie coaching podcasts, and it really hit home to me with beer league is focus on what you can control. You might, I think we instinctively learned that at Brother Rice of we might get lit up for a bunch of goals, but we still stopped a heck of a lot and a lot that we shouldn't have because we controlled what we could. We
Right.
couldn't control the bad passes out in front of the net or the fact that we were seeing so many odd man rushes. But the things we could, we handled pretty well. And then the other one was Mitch Korn was scouting a goalie. Goalie got lit up. And so he decided, I'm not going to come back for the next game when the goalie played really well. And the other scout asked him, you don't want to see him play well in a good game? He goes, no, I learned more about the goaltender by how he plays in a bad game and how he carries himself than, and so it's like, gosh, if a scout would have came to one of our games, what would they have thought of us? Because we had some pretty thick skin in those days.
That certainly was.
Not only was it the score that we had to worry about, but some of our teammates and things they would say.
There were some of those games too in the locker room. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we had our allies for sure, guys like Sikorsky and Anarino and Saviano, but there were a few that shall remain nameless on the podcast where it was like, come on, guys, grow up. Yeah, which I had to laugh seeing the recent Blackhawks video on social media about their new beer and seeing that TJ was sitting down with the Wirtz fella talking about this beer for the Blackhawks. And I'm going, but you're a Red Wings fan. What are you saying? And it was funny because I texted him that day. He goes, I've been waiting for this. I knew as soon as the video went out, you'd be coming at me with this one. I was like, yeah, I would be. But yeah, so well, Don, it has been fun chatting with you. It's been way too long since we've connected.
Absolutely. We should try to do this again sometime.
Yeah, we will. I still think we need to get the band back together for a weekend tournament, even if not everybody plays. Or say we're getting together for a tournament and just get together and drink. Who knows? So I'm going to hit end on the broadcast. So I'm going to share that chirp with you.
All right.
It was so nice to connect with Don again and bring up some of those old memories of days gone by. He was a great goalie partner who I never had any issues with. We were always cheering for each other. Hopefully we can continue to keep in touch. Remember, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube simply by searching for Wash Up Goalie and I'll pop up. Visit washupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey video highlights, and of course all podcast episodes. If you want some Wash Up Goalie or Tendy Talk apparel, be sure to visit my Threadless shop by clicking the merchandise link on my website. If you like this podcast, go listen to the BLPA Big Show. It's the OG BLPA Podcast Network show where a couple of beer league players talk beer league hockey, draft experience shenanigans, and exploits from around the game. Be sure to check out the full lineup of hockey-related podcasts on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. There are too many lists here, but shows like the Grind Line Podcast, the Rig Rat Podcast, and the other Connor Podcast can all be found. As mentioned last week with Laura Hopewell of October Saves, I am participating in the October Saves Challenge this month in an effort to help raise money for cancer research and patient care in honor of my mom, who lost her battle with cancer on Mother's Day of this year. If you're in a position to donate, click the link in my bio on any of my social media presences. I've set a lofty goal, but I know the hockey community is tight-knit and always there to help each other. To me, this is something small that I could do in my mom's memory. If you're looking for something good to read, give yourself a subscription to Vintage Tendy magazine. Published quarterly, the magazine takes a deep dive into an 80s or 90s era goalie. The first 5 issues, they've covered Felix Potvin, Grant Fuhr, Tim Shovelday, Jocelyn Thibault, Ken Reggett, John Van Beesbrook, and episode 20 guest mask painter and creator Don Strauss. I'm eagerly checking the mailbox each day as the next issue is due out with a rundown on Darren Popa. I need to thank the band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music on my episodes. You can download their music on iTunes or listen wherever you stream music from. I'm always working on lining up other goalies to talk to. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washupgoalie39@gmail.com or send me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you're a brand that wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the platform you're listening on. It's an easy action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. So, until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck.
Yeah, Dave.
Hey, have you checked out the pond today?
It's funny you ask. I was just down there this morning.
Yeah, any good news?
Well, Dave, the pond?
Yeah?
It's froze right over.